Captain Lee Dongwu walked slowly into the biggest training room he had ever seen in his life. The metal walls stretched up so high that he could barely see the ceiling above his head. Bright white lights made everything look cold and unfriendly, like being inside a giant machine. The air smelled strange with chemicals that burned his nose and made his eyes water. A little bit. All around him were creatures that looked like they came from his worst nightmares back on Earth. There were tall, blue aliens with 4 arms that moved like snakes. There were short, fat creatures covered in spikes that walked on 6 legs, making clicking sounds on the metal floor. Some aliens had no legs at all and just floated in the air using some kind of technology he did not understand. The biggest shock was how huge everything was compared to humans. The smallest alien in the room was still taller than Dongwu, and he was not a short man by Earth standards. Most of the creatures were twice his height and 3 times as wide, with muscles that looked like they could crush a car without trying. Their armor was thick and shiny, making them look even more dangerous than they already were. Dongwu wore his simple green military uniform from Earth, with his green beret sitting on his head like a small flag of his home planet. He felt very small and very alone as he walked past groups of alien soldiers who stopped their training to stare at him. Some of them made sounds that he guessed were laughter, but it sounded more like growling or hissing. Behind him walked the other human soldiers who had been chosen to represent Earth in this galactic military program. There was Sergeant Park Min-ho, who had fought in 3 wars back home and never lost a single battle. Lieutenant Kim So-ra was the best fighter Dongwu had ever seen, and she could kill a man with her bare hands in dozens of different ways. There were 12 humans total, but they looked like children next to the alien warriors. The training master was a creature called Commander Vex, who looked like someone had built a person out of gray stone and given it 4 arms. Each arm was as thick as a tree trunk and covered with scars from old battles. His face had no nose, just 2 holes for breathing, and his mouth was full of teeth that looked designed for tearing meat. His voice sounded like rocks being ground together when he spoke. Commander Vex called for attention, and the entire arena fell silent, except for the humming of machines somewhere in the walls. He spoke in the common galactic language that all species were supposed to learn when they joined the Alliance. His words came out slow and clear, like he was talking to children who might not understand. Today would be combat training where different species would test their fighting skills against each other. The aliens began making excited noises, and Dongwu noticed how many of them were looking at the small group of humans with what looked like hungry expressions on their faces. One alien in particular kept staring at Dongwu with yellow eyes that reminded him of a snake getting ready to strike. This creature was from a race called the Saurons, and his name was Krell. He stood almost 8 feet tall, with green scaly skin and muscles that bulged under natural armor plating that covered most of his body. His hands ended in sharp claws that looked like they could cut through metal. Krell had a reputation throughout the Galactic fleet as one of the most dangerous fighters alive. His species had conquered dozens of planets before they joined the Galactic Alliance, and Krell himself had killed hundreds of enemies in single combat. Other aliens gave him respect and space when he walked by because they knew what he was capable of doing. When Commander Vex announced that the first match would be between a human soldier and Krell, the entire arena exploded with laughter. Aliens from every corner of the galaxy started making sounds that ranged from barking to whistling, but all of them seemed to be laughing at the same joke. The joke was that a tiny human was about to fight one of the most deadly creatures in known space. Dongwu felt his teammates looking at him with worry in their eyes. Sergeant Park stepped closer and whispered that maybe they should ask for a different opponent. Lieutenant Kim touched his arm and said quietly that no one would think less of him if he backed down from this fight. Even the human officers who had sent them here would understand. But Dongwu just shook his head and stepped forward toward the fighting circle in the center of the arena. He had not come all this way across the galaxy just to back down from the first real challenge. The other humans might be worried, but he felt something different building inside his chest. It was not fear or worry, but something cold and sharp, like a knife blade. The alien laughter got louder as he walked to the center of the room. Some creatures were pointing at him with whatever they used for fingers. Others were making gestures that probably meant the same thing in any language. They all thought they were about to watch a human get killed in the most one-sided fight anyone had ever seen, Krell followed him into the fighting circle, moving with the smooth grace of a predator who had never lost a fight. The big alien looked down at Dongwu like he was studying an insect that had somehow wandered into his path. His yellow eyes moved up and down, taking in every detail of the human soldier standing in front of him. The arena fell quiet as both fighters faced each other in the center of the circle. Commander Vex began explaining the rules, but Dongwu was not really listening. He was watching Krell and thinking about all the ways this alien could kill him in the next few minutes. There were probably more ways than he could count. What the aliens did not know was that Captain Lee Dongwu had not been chosen randomly to represent Earth in this program. He was one of the most dangerous soldiers his planet had ever produced. He had fought in wars that would give nightmares to most of these alien warriors. He had killed more enemies than some entire alien armies. Back on Earth, Dongwu wore the green beret of his planet's most elite Special Forces unit. These were soldiers who could disappear into any environment, kill silently with dozens of different weapons, and survive in conditions that would kill normal humans. His grandfather had worn the same beret in Earth ancient wars, and his father had died wearing one in a battle on a distant moon. The aliens kept laughing and pointing, but Dongwu just stood quietly in the center of the circle. He touched the green beret on his head once, like he was making sure it was still there. Then he looked up at Krell and smiled, a small, cold smile that did not reach his eyes. The big alien saw that smile, and for just a moment something flickered in his yellow eyes. Maybe it was confusion, or maybe it was the first tiny hint of doubt. But the moment passed quickly and Krell went back to looking confident and superior. Commander Vex raised one of his forearms to signal the start of the match. The arena fell completely, silent as thousands of alien eyes focused on the two fighters. The only sound was the humming of machines and the quiet breathing of the human soldier, who was about to show the galaxy what Earth warriors were really capable of doing. Krell walked around the fighting circle like a giant predator showing off for the crowd. His massive feet made deep scratches in the metal floor with each step, and every movement showed off the incredible strength hidden in his huge body. The alien warrior flexed all four of his arms at the same time, making muscles bulge under his natural armor plating like mountains moving under his skin. The watching aliens cheered and made excited noises in dozens of different languages. They had all heard stories about Krell and his fighting skills. Some had seen him kill enemies with his bare hands in previous battles. Others knew about the planets his species had conquered before joining the Galactic Alliance. Everyone expected this fight to be over in seconds. Krell opened his mouth and showed rows of sharp teeth that looked like they belonged on a shark. His yellow eyes glowed with confidence and something that might have been hunger. He had fought warriors from dozens of different species, and none of them had ever given him a real challenge. This tiny human would be even easier than usual. The big alien began to speak in the common galactic language that all Alliance members were supposed to understand. His voice sounded like someone grinding rocks together mixed with the hiss of escaping gas. Every word came out slow and clear, so that everyone in the arena could hear what he was saying. He told the crowd that humans were the weakest species ever to join the Galactic Alliance. They were soft creatures who belonged behind desks pushing papers and doing mathematics, not on battlefields fighting real warriors. Their bodies were fragile, and their minds were too slow to handle real combat situations. The alien audience laughed and cheered at every insult. Creatures from dozens of worlds nodded their heads, or whatever they used for heads, in agreement. Many of them had met humans before, and none had been impressed by their physical capabilities. Earth soldiers were known throughout the galaxy as polite weaklings who talked too much and fought too little. Krell continued his speech, saying that human soldiers were so pathetic they needed special clothing to make themselves feel brave. He pointed at Dongwu's green uniform, and especially at the beret on his head. The alien said that humans wore silly hats because they were too scared to fight without something to hide behind. Other aliens in the crowd picked up on this theme and began making their own jokes about human military uniforms. Some said the green color was meant to help humans hide in plants like coward animals. Others suggested that human hats were designed to protect their tiny brains from damage during the few fights they actually tried to have. Dongwu stood quietly in the center of the circle, listening to every word. His face showed no emotion at all, but his dark eyes were getting colder with each insult. The other humans watching from the sidelines could see the change happening, even if the aliens could not. They recognized the warning signs that meant their captain was reaching his breaking point. Lieutenant Kim. Sora grabbed Sergeant Park Min-ho's arm and whispered that they needed to be ready for what was about to happen. She had seen Dongwu in this mood before during their wars back on Earth. When he got that particular look in his eyes, people started dying very quickly and very violently. Krell was enjoying himself too much to notice the change in his opponent. The big alien raised his voice even louder so that everyone in the arena could hear his final insults. He said that Earth soldiers were so weak that their enemies back home probably let them win battles out of pity. He claimed that humans only survived as a species because they bred like insects and hid whenever real predators showed up. Then Krell made the mistake that would cost him his life. He stepped forward and looked down at the small human soldier standing in front of him. The alien reached down with one massive clawed hand and slapped Dongwu across the face as hard as he could. The sound of the slap echoed through the arena like a gunshot. Every creature in the room heard it clearly, and many flinched at the violence of it. Dongwu's head snapped to one side from the force and a thin line of blood appeared on his cheek, where one of Krell's sharp claws had scratched the skin. But the physical blow was not the worst part of the insult. The slap knocked Dongwu Green Beret off his head and sent it flying to land on the metal floor several feet away. The small piece of cloth lay there looking helpless and abandoned, while the alien crowd cheered even louder. Krell was not finished with his demonstration. He walked over to where the beret had fallen and placed one massive foot on top of it. The weight of his body pressed the fabric against the rough metal floor, and he began to grind it back and forth like he was crushing an insect under his heel. The green beret that had belonged to Dongwu's grandfather during Earth Ancient Wars was being destroyed by an alien who thought it was just a piece of worthless cloth. The same beret that his father had died wearing in battle on a distant moon was now being treated like garbage by a creature who understood nothing about honor or sacrifice. Every human in the arena felt their hearts stop beating for a moment. They all knew what that beret meant to their captain. It was not just a hat or a piece of uniform, it was a symbol of everything he had fought for and everyone he had lost. It represented generations of Earth warriors who had died protecting their families and their world. The alien crowd was making so much noise that they almost missed the sound that came from Dongwu's throat. It was not quite a growl and not quite a sigh, but something in between, like air escaping from a tire with a slow leak. The sound was so quiet that only the humans close to him could hear it. Dongwu reached up and touched his cheek where Krell had slapped him. His fingers came away with a small amount of blood on them, and he looked at it for a moment like he was surprised to see it there. Then he looked down at his beret, still trapped under the alien massive foot. When he raised his head to look at Krell again, something had changed in his eyes. They were still dark brown like they had always been, but now they held something cold and deadly that had not been there before. It was the look of a predator who had just decided to stop playing with his prey. Krell saw the change and laughed even louder, thinking that the human was finally showing fear or anger. The big alien spread all four of his arms wide and invited the crowd to cheer even more. He had no idea that he was looking at one of the most dangerous killers his species would ever encounter. The other humans watching from the sidelines felt a chill run down their spines. They had seen that look in Dongwu's eyes before during their deadliest battles back home. It meant that their captain had stopped thinking of his opponent as a living creature and started thinking of him as a problem that needed to be solved quickly and permanently. Sergeant Park whispered to Lieutenant Kim that the aliens had no idea what they were about to witness. They thought they were watching a weak human get humiliated by a superior warrior. What they were actually about to see was why Earth had sent its most dangerous soldiers to represent their planet among the stars. Commander Vex raised his hand to officially start the match, but everyone could see that Dongwu was already moving. The human soldier took a step forward toward his opponent, and the entire arena seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The fight that everyone expected to last only seconds was about to begin, but it would not end the way anyone thought it would. Commander Vex started to raise his hand to begin the official match, but Captain Lee Dongwu was already moving before the signal was given. The human soldier exploded forward with a speed that shocked every creature watching in the arena. His body moved like a spring that had been compressed and suddenly released. The aliens who had been laughing and cheering fell silent so quickly that the sudden quiet was almost as loud as their previous noise. Thousands of eyes from dozens of different species focused on the small human figure that was moving faster than most of them had ever seen any creature move. Krell had been expecting the human to either run away in fear, or maybe try some clumsy attack that would be easy to block. The big alien had fought hundreds of opponents and none of them had ever surprised him. He was confident that his superior size and strength would end this fight before it really began. But Dongwu was not fighting like any opponent Krell had ever faced. Before, the human did not try to match strength with strength or size with size. Instead, he used his speed and his knowledge of anatomy to target the weak spots that every creature had, no matter how big or strong they were. The first move happened so fast that many aliens missed it completely. Dongwu ducked under Krell's first massive swing and drove his fist into a soft spot just below the alien ribcage. It was a place where the natural armor plating was thinner and the internal organs were less protected. The punch landed with a sound like a hammer hitting raw meat, and the impact sent shockwaves through Krell's entire body. The big alien eyes went wide with surprise and pain, because no opponent had ever hit him that hard in that exact spot. He had been expecting the human to bounce off his armor like a small animal attacking a tank before Krell could react to the first hit. Dongwu was already setting up his second attack. The human grabbed the alien's thick wrist with both hands and used Krell's own weight and momentum against him. It was a fighting technique that Earth soldiers had perfected over thousands of years of warfare. The throw happened so smoothly that it looked almost like dancing. Dongwu planted his feet and twisted his whole body while pulling on Krell's arm. The 8-foot-tall alien warrior found himself flying through the air despite weighing 3 times as much as his human opponent. Krell crashed to the metal floor with a sound like a building falling. Down, the impact was so hard that it shook the entire fighting platform and sent vibrations through the arena floor. Every alien watching felt the shock wave through their feet, or whatever they used for feet. The big alien tried to get back up, but his body was not responding the way it should. The punch to his soft spot had done more damage than he realized, and the throw had knocked the wind out of him. But even worse than the physical damage was the psychological shock of being handled so easily by such a small opponent. Dongwu was already moving to finish the fight before Krell could recover. The human soldier had learned long ago that in real combat, there was no such thing as fair play or giving an opponent time to recover. Every second you wasted was another chance for your enemy to kill you. The final sequence took exactly 4 seconds from start to finish, but to everyone watching it seemed to happen both incredibly fast and in slow motion. At the same time, Dongwu moved to Krell's head. While the alien was still trying to get his breath back, the human placed one hand on each side of the massive skull, feeling for the exact right position. His fingers found the spots he was looking for based on his knowledge of alien anatomy that he had studied before coming to the Galactic fleet. Krell's yellow eyes showed real fear for the first time in his life as he realized what was about to happen. He tried to speak or move, but his body was still not working properly. From the previous attacks, all he could do was look up at the small human who was about to end his life. What happened next was something that Earth soldiers had been trained to do since humans first learned how to fight wars. The technique was simple, brutal, and completely effective when performed by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Dongwu twisted Krell's head with a sharp, violent motion that used all the strength in his arms and shoulders. The movement was precise and controlled, like a doctor performing surgery. Except this surgery was designed to kill rather than heal. The sound of breaking bone echoed through the arena like thunder during a storm. It was a noise that every creature recognized on some deep instinctual level as the sound of death. The massive alien warrior who had conquered worlds and killed hundreds in battle died instantly without even having time to make a final sound. Krell's body went completely limp, and his yellow eyes stared at nothing. The alien, who had been so confident and superior just moments before, was now just a pile of cooling meat on the metal floor. His 4 powerful arms lay motionless, and his sharp teeth would never bite another opponent. The arena was so quiet that everyone could hear the humming of the ship engines somewhere in the walls. Thousands of alien warriors stared in complete shock at the small human standing over the corpse of one of the galaxy's most feared fighters. Dongwu calmly walked over to where his green beret lay on the floor, still marked with the impression of Krell's foot. He picked it up carefully and brushed off the dirt and scratches as best he could. The fabric was damaged, but it was still recognizable as the symbol of Earth Elite Warriors. He placed the beret back on his head and adjusted it to sit at the proper angle. Then he looked around at the watching crowd of aliens with the same cold expression he had worn during the fight. His message was clear without him having to say a single word. The message was that humans might look small and weak compared to other galactic species, but appearances could be very deceiving. Earth soldiers had spent thousands of years learning how to kill efficiently, and they were very good at their job. Some of the alien spectators took involuntary steps backward when Dongwu's eyes passed over them. They had just witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about the hierarchy of species in the galaxy. The weakest race had just killed one of the strongest with nothing but bare hands and superior technique. Lieutenant Kim So-ra and Sergeant Park Min-ho looked at each other with expressions that mixed pride with concern. They were proud that their captain had defended human honor so effectively, but they were worried about what would happen next. The alien races did not like being shown up by creatures they considered inferior. Commander Vex stood frozen with his hand still raised from starting the match that had ended almost before it began. His forearms trembled slightly as he tried to process what he had just witnessed. In all his years of running combat training, he had never seen anything quite like this. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. Every creature in the arena was trying to understand how their assumptions about human weakness had been so completely wrong. The small soldiers from Earth had just proven that they were far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Finally, Commander Vex lowered his hand and declared the match over, as if that was not already completely obvious. His voice cracked slightly when he announced that the human had won by combat termination. The alien crowd continued to stare in shocked silence. Dongwu walked calmly back toward his fellow human soldiers while leaving Krell's corpse where it lay. The other humans formed up around their captain in a protective formation, even though it was clear that no alien in the arena wanted to challenge him after what they had just seen. The fight that was supposed to prove human weakness had instead demonstrated human lethality in the most dramatic way possible. The galaxy would never look at Earth soldiers the same way again. Within 2 hours of Krell death, every command center, communication hub, and diplomatic office in the Galactic fleet was buzzing with the news. The story spread faster than light-speed transmissions as alien officers rushed to report what had happened to their superiors back on their homeworlds. The initial reports were confusing and contradictory. Some aliens claimed that the human had used hidden weapons or illegal technology. Others insisted that Krell had been poisoned before the fight began. A few suggested that the whole thing had been staged as some kind of elaborate trick to fool the Galactic Alliance. But the security recordings from the arena told the true story, and those recordings were being viewed by alien leaders across the galaxy. The footage showed clearly that Captain Lee Dongwu had killed Krell using nothing but his bare hands' superior technique and knowledge of alien anatomy. The Sauron race was the first to demand answers. Their representatives sent angry messages to every level of the galactic command structure, asking how their greatest warrior could have fallen to such a supposedly weak creature. They wanted investigations, trials, and most of all, they wanted revenge against the human who had humiliated their species. Admiral Zephon of the Sauron High Command was so furious that he broke 3 communication devices while trying to contact the fleet commanders. His yellow eyes glowed with rage as he watched the security footage over and over again. Each viewing made him angrier because he could see that Krell had been completely outclassed by a superior fighter. Other alien species had different reactions to the news. The peaceful Centauri, who had never fought a war in their entire history, were terrified at the idea that humans could kill so easily and efficiently. They began discussing whether Earth should be expelled from the Alliance before these dangerous creatures could cause more violence. The warlike Orion Empire had the opposite reaction. Their generals were impressed by the human fighting skills and wanted to recruit Earth soldiers for their own military campaigns. They sent secret messages offering large payments for human warriors who would fight in their private armies. The insectoid hive queens were fascinated by human anatomy and wanted to capture some Earth soldiers for scientific study. They could not understand how creatures with such weak-looking bodies could generate so much destructive force when fighting. Commander Vex called an emergency assembly that brought together representatives from every species in the Galactic Alliance. The massive conference chamber was filled with creatures from dozens of worlds, all talking at once, in languages that ranged from musical tones to harsh clicking sounds. The chamber looked like something from a nightmare, with beings that defied every rule of biology, sitting next to each other around a circular table. Some floated in the air using anti-gravity technology. Others needed special breathing apparatus to survive in the artificial atmosphere. General Kim Tae-hyun entered the chamber flanked by Captain Dong-woo and the other human representatives. The general was a small man with gray hair and deep lines around, his eyes that spoke of many battles fought and won. His uniform was simple compared to the elaborate outfits worn by alien officers, but he carried himself with quiet confidence. The alien representatives fell silent as the humans took their assigned seats. Many of them stared openly at Dong-woo, trying to understand how such an ordinary-looking creature could have killed Krell so easily. The human captain still wore his green beret and showed no signs of being affected by all the attention. Admiral Stefan was the first to speak, his voice filled with barely controlled rage. He demanded to know what kind of training Earth soldiers received and whether they used illegal enhancement drugs or hidden technology to increase their fighting ability. General Kim stood slowly and addressed the assembly in perfect galactic common tongue. His voice was calm and steady, as if he were discussing the weather instead of defending his species against accusations of cheating in mortal combat. He explained that humans had received no special enhancements or secret technology. Everything they knew about fighting had been learned through thousands of years of constant warfare back on their home planet. While other species had evolved past their violent nature, humans had perfected the art of killing each other. The general told them about Earth history of wars that lasted for decades and claimed millions of lives. He described battles where soldiers fought hand to hand in trenches filled with mud and blood. He spoke of cities burned to ash and entire populations wiped out by weapons that most galactic species had never imagined. Many aliens in the chamber began making nervous sounds as they realized that human history was far more violent than anything their own species had experienced. The peaceful races like the Centauri looked sick, as General Kim described atomic weapons that could destroy entire continents in minutes. The general continued his explanation by describing human military training. He told them about soldiers who were taught to kill with their bare hands from childhood, about special forces units that could survive for weeks in hostile environments while hunting enemies who were trying to do the same to them. He explained that the green beret worn by Captain Dong-woo was not just a piece of cloth, but a symbol of Earth's most elite warriors. These were soldiers who had been selected from millions of candidates and trained to operate alone behind enemy lines where the smallest mistake meant death. The alien representatives listened with growing unease as General Kim painted a picture of human society that was completely different from what they had expected. He told them that every human child grew up hearing stories of wars and heroes who had died in battle. That competition and conflict were built into human nature at the deepest genetic level. Some aliens began to understand why Captain Dong-woo had moved with such deadly efficiency. During his fight with Krell, the human had not learned to fight in some training academy. He had been born into a species that had spent its entire existence learning how to kill more effectively. General Kim finished his presentation by explaining that humans did not enjoy violence or seek out conflict, but they were very good at both when the situation required it. Earth had joined the Galactic Alliance hoping to move beyond their violent past, but they would always retain the skills that had kept their species alive. The chamber erupted in dozens of different languages as alien representatives tried to process what they had learned. Some species called for immediate military alliances with Earth. Others demanded that humans be restricted or monitored to prevent them from becoming a threat commander. Vex used his authority to restore order, but it took several minutes of shouting before the various aliens calmed down enough to continue the meeting. The big four-armed creature looked tired as he tried to mediate between species who all had different ideas about what should happen next. Admiral Zephan demanded that Captain Dong-woo be punished for killing Krell, even though the death had occurred during a legal combat trial. Several other alien representatives supported this demand, claiming that humans were too dangerous to be allowed to participate in military training. But General Kim pointed out that Krell had issued the challenge, and had been the first to use violence when he slapped the human captain. The fight had been conducted according to Galactic Alliance rules, and the outcome was legitimate, regardless of how unexpected it had been. The debate continued for hours, as different species argued about what the death of Krell meant for the future of the Galactic Alliance. Some wanted to embrace human military skills, while others wanted to ban Earth from all combat activities. Finally, Commander Vex called for a vote on whether humans would be allowed to continue their military service with the Galactic Fleet. The result was close, but the majority voted to allow Earth soldiers to remain in their current positions. However, the vote came with new restrictions and requirements. Human soldiers would be monitored more closely during training. Their combat techniques would be studied and analyzed by alien scientists. All human military personnel would be required to undergo additional psychological evaluation. As the meeting ended, and the various alien representatives filed out of the chamber, many of them stole glances at Captain Dongwu. The small human sat quietly in his chair, still wearing his green beret and showing no emotion about the decision that had just been made about his future. But everyone in the chamber knew that something fundamental had changed in the Galactic Alliance. The humans had proven that they were not the weak, harmless creatures that everyone had assumed them to be. The galaxy would never look at Earth soldiers the same way again. Lieutenant Kim Sora noticed the change the very next morning when she walked into the main dining facility for her breakfast. The huge room was filled with hundreds of alien soldiers from dozens of different species, all eating their various foods and talking in their strange languages. But something was different from every other morning since the humans had arrived on the Galactic Fleet. Instead of the usual pointing and laughing when she entered the room, the aliens fell quiet and watched her with careful, respectful eyes. A group of tall blue Centauri who had always made jokes about human size quickly moved their chairs to make room for her to pass. Their forearms moved nervously as they avoided making eye contact with her. Several Orion warriors, who usually took up extra space just to annoy human soldiers, politely shifted over to give her more room. Kim Sora found it both amusing and slightly disturbing to see creatures twice her size acting nervous around her. She was the same person she had been yesterday, with the same small human body and the same simple military uniform. But now these alien warriors looked at her like she might explode into violence at any moment. The change was not limited to just her sergeant. Park Min-ho discovered that aliens who had ignored him for weeks were now eager to have conversations about human military tactics. They asked detailed questions about Earth wars and wanted to know about the training that human soldiers received. Some of the younger alien warriors began following human soldiers around like students studying a master. They watched every movement and tried to understand how creatures so small could be so deadly. The humans found this attention flattering, but also uncomfortable since they were used to being overlooked. Captain Dongwu became something like a celebrity among the alien military personnel. Stories about his 4-second victory over Krell had grown in the telling and now described him as some kind of supernatural warrior who could kill with a single touch. Aliens who had never spoken to him before now approached with questions about human fighting techniques. They wanted to know if all Earth soldiers could move that fast, or if Dongwu was special even among his own people. They asked about his green beret and what it meant to wear such a symbol. The captain answered their questions politely but briefly. He was not comfortable with the hero worship and preferred to be treated like any other soldier doing his job, but he understood that his actions had changed how the entire galaxy viewed his species. The most dramatic change happened in the training facilities where human soldiers had previously been relegated to the easiest and safest exercises. Now alien instructors were asking them to demonstrate Earth fighting techniques for the other students. Commander Vex assigned Kim Sora to teach a class on human combat methods to a group of alien officers who wanted to understand how such small creatures could be so effective in battle. She felt nervous about teaching warriors who were twice her size, but she accepted the assignment. During her first class, she demonstrated basic human hand-to-hand combat on a volunteer Sauron warrior who was confident that his natural armor would protect him from any damage. She showed the class how to find weak spots in alien anatomy and how to use an opponent weight against them. The Sauron volunteer ended up on the floor with Kim Sora, a small human hand pressing against a nerve cluster in his neck that caused temporary paralysis. The other aliens in the class made impressed noises and began taking notes on everything she had shown them. Word spread quickly that humans were not just lucky fighters, but had actually developed sophisticated combat techniques over thousands of years of warfare. Alien military academies began requesting human instructors to teach courses on Earth fighting methods. The diplomatic corps, also, noticed changes in how other species interacted with human representatives. Trade negotiations that had been stalled for months suddenly began moving forward as alien business people realized that making enemies of humans might be extremely unwise. Ambassador Lee Jung-min found that his counterparts from other species listened more carefully to his proposals and seemed more willing to compromise on difficult issues. The small blue planet on the edge of the galaxy had suddenly become much more important in galactic politics, but the changes were not entirely positive. Some alien species became paranoid about human intentions and began treating Earth soldiers like dangerous animals that might attack without warning. Security was increased around human quarters, and some areas of the fleet were declared off-limits to human personnel. The insectoid hive queens sent secret messages to their agents throughout the galaxy, ordering them to gather intelligence about human military capabilities. They wanted to know how many soldiers Earth could field in a war and what kind of weapons their factories could produce. Several peaceful species, including the plant-based arboreals, began discussing whether the Galactic Alliance should impose restrictions on human population growth. They worried that a species so skilled at warfare might eventually become a threat to everyone else. General Kim Tae-hyun called a meeting with all human personnel to discuss how they should handle their new reputation. He reminded them that they were representatives of Earth and that their behavior would be judged by alien species who were now paying very close attention. The general explained that humans had gained respect through fear rather than friendship, and that this kind of respect could be dangerous if it turned into hatred or suspicion. He ordered all human soldiers to be extra careful about their conduct and to avoid any actions that might be seen as threatening. Captain Dongwoo suggested that they use their new reputation to push for better assignments and more important roles in galactic defense operations. If aliens now believed that humans were elite warriors, then they should be given elite responsibilities. Lieutenant Kim So-ra agreed and pointed out that they had spent too long being treated like junior partners in the alliance. Now that other species understood human capabilities, they should demand equal treatment in military planning and operations. The human officers began developing a strategy for leveraging their newfound respect into better positions within the galactic power structure. 6 months after the incident in the training arena, the galaxy looked very different. Humans had been reassigned from support roles to frontline combat positions. When hostile alien races threatened Alliance worlds, it was human soldiers who led the assault teams. Their reputation for swift, brutal efficiency made enemies surrender rather than face them in battle. Captain Dongwoo, now promoted to Major, led the first all-human strike force in galactic history. His team included Lieutenant Kim So-ra, who had proven herself an expert in alien anatomy and knew exactly where to strike for maximum damage. Sergeant Park Min-ho had become a master of infiltration and assassination. Together, they formed the core of what other species called the Death Squad. Their first major mission came when the Vorthan Empire, a race of insect-like creatures, attacked a peaceful mining colony. The Vorthans had ignored all diplomatic attempts to negotiate and had begun killing civilian workers. The Galactic Council voted unanimously to send in the humans. The battle lasted exactly 18 minutes. Major Dongwoo's team moved through the Vorthan positions like ghosts, striking fast and disappearing before the enemy could react. When it was over, the entire Vorthan assault force was dead, and not a single human soldier had been seriously injured. The mining colony was saved, and the Vorthan Empire immediately sued for peace. As Major Dongwoo stood among the defeated enemies, his green beret still sitting proudly on his head, he thought about how far humans had come. They had entered the galactic community as the weakest species, dismissed and mocked by superior alien races. But they had found their strength in what others saw as their greatest weakness. Humans were not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest species in the galaxy, but they were the most dangerous because they had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to kill efficiently. While other races had moved beyond violence, humans had perfected it. In a universe full of advanced civilizations, sometimes the most primitive skills were the most valuable. The galaxy had learned to respect the small humans from Earth. And that respect had been earned in exactly 4 seconds, with the death of a warrior who thought a green beret was just a hat.